Hello everyone and welcome to this first session of the sixth week of the Angular development course. In this week, we will be concentrating on the intercomponent communication along with how we can make external HTTP API calls using Angular. So the previous week, we learned on how to use Angular services and how to perform some common or specific functionalities and how can we write reusable code, how can we create some common variables, host it in a service and access that variable from different components, manipulate that variable from different components, and we also saw how we can create different instances of the same services. How we also saw that how observables are superior means to handle asynchronous programming in JavaScript as compared to promises. Then we also saw that RxJS is a library which uses observables to handle asynchronous events. It also provides operators to perform additional operations on observables. So basically in the previous week we learned more about Angular services, and we understood that how can we leverage Angular to create reusable code and also to host some global data across the application. So in this current week, we are going to focus on the following main topics. The first topic which we are going to cover is the parent-child component communication. The second we will cover is component communication using services. The third part which we are going to cover is how can we make HTTP calls to external API servers. Then we will see on how we can handle the API response and manipulate it. Next we will see if there are any errors which are received from API calls, how can we handle it. And finally we will be looking into HTTP interceptors. So this is an important week where we are going to cover a bunch of topics. So yeah, just stay along and we'll learn it together. So the following are the learning objectives of this week. So in this week we will be learning on how communication between a parent to child and general component to component happens in Angular. Then we'll understand how to make external API calls to fetch data and consume it in our application. Then we'll understand how to handle errors while making API calls. And finally we'll see what is the concept of HTTP interceptor and where to use it. So first topic for the day is parent to child component communication in Angular. So we can pass data from parent to child using @input decorator, and we can listen for data changes from child using @output decorator. The parent can also interact with the child element using @view child or local variable. So the third part is something that we saw earlier. If you remember when we were discussing about content projection, we saw that how can we get any reference to a component or HTML DOM element from the HTML view, and we can manipulate it from the component. So this is what that is talking about. So now let's get into the demo of this, and before we proceed, I want you all to come to the whiteboard with me so that we can understand this concept a little better. So the main topic of this day is component communication, right? So there are you have to see what are the various methods or various configuration of component possible and how can we communicate between them. So one can be that you have a parent component and you have a child component within the parent component, and you may want them to interact with each other. So it can either be a single way communication or it can be a bidirectional communication as well. So this is one scenario which we have to handle. And the second scenario which can be possible is you have sibling components. By sibling, I mean that they are all ancestors of, they have the same ancestors, but they are not embedded one with the other, but rather they are part of the same ancestor. So one example of this could be, so say suppose I have one app component .html, and here I have a component for my navigation bar. Here I have a component for displaying the welcome banner, and here I have a component for displaying the latest news, and here I have a component for footer links. So all these four components over here share the common parent of app, right? And they are siblings. By siblings I mean they are not directly one inside the other, but they are existing independently but attached to a common parent, just how we have brothers and sisters. So this is the other way, the other possibility by which we can have the communication happening. So in this case, where you have this parent to child relationship, we can make the communication possible by using something called as @input decorator. So this is used whenever you want the communication to happen from a parent to child. So I'll give you a scenario for this. So assume I have a component over here. So say this is my app component, and inside this I have another child component. So maybe say this is a component that displays the list of blog in my component, right? So what happens is, in my parent component, when I load the application for the first time, I can make an external API call to my blog service, get the data from the server, and whenever I get that data, I can pass that data to this blog component as an input. So what the input helps us to achieve is, So from my parent component, if there is a data which I need to pass to my child component, and whenever that data changes, I also want my child component to re-render and update it. So those are the scenarios where I use the @input decorator. So basically it's used for parent to child communication. Okay. So similarly, there is another decorator over here called as output decorator. So what is output decorator is, it is used for the reverse way, that is for child to parent communication. So I'll give you an example for this. So say assume like I have a parent child, I have a parent component, and here I just have like something like block count, and here I display like just the total number of blocks that is written. So say currently I have like two blocks that are written. Okay, and inside my block component I like allow the user to create another like extra blocks if they want. So just imagine this scenario. So here just assume that my user has like clicked on this plus button, he or she has like written a new block and they have now submitted it. So what that will do is, now this service will like this will save using the API service, and this comment, this component will get updated. But I also want in parallel this number to get updated, right? So basically there is a event, or like there is a trigger which I want to trigger from my child to the parent. So for these kind of scenarios we have something called as a output decorator, and for using output decorator we have to have something called as event emitter. Okay, so basically what happens is, theoretically, from your child you kind of emit an event, and that event will get captured by your parent. Okay, so that is how this output works. Input works the other way. So input, what happens is, from your parent you pass an input to your child, and whenever there is a change to this input, your child will get re-rendered. So that is the concept of input and output. For the second scenario, this is something which we discussed in the previous week itself. So like if you remember, I showed you guys how can we create reusable components, reusable functions and reusable variables, and how can we host them using a single service, and how all these components can then connect to this service and like retrieve the data or write the data, or like use the reusable functions. So this is how you can communicate between sibling components in Angular. So this is a very important interview concept, so please ensure that you understand it properly. So just to recap, what we discussed is, there are two configurations or two possibilities how your components can be arranged, right? So one is the possibility where you have a parent child, and inside that parent child you have a child component. Okay, so something like this. So if I have to write the code, it will be something like this. So say assume I have something like, say I have my, I'm just making it up. So say I have something, a component name called as app root, and inside app root I again have a component called, say, app navbar. Okay, and just for sake of simplicity we will just close it, and this navbar also, like just assume that this navbar is also closed here. Okay, so this is a configuration where we call is a parent child, because this child is sitting inside this parent. Okay, so that is what we call as a parent child relationship. And a sibling configuration could be something like this. I have, say, like navbar, and I close this navbar over here itself. Then I have something called, say, blog, and I close this blog component here itself, and together this is sitting, say, in my app root component, and I close it over here. So in this scenario, this nav and blog share a sibling relationship because they are part of the same parent. But for this app root, these both are child components. So ensure that you understand this concept very clearly, because it is very important that you have this concepts clear in your mind before we proceed with this section. Okay. So we understood now what is a parent-child configuration, and we also understood now what is a sibling configuration. So with that being said, we also now saw that in order to have your parent-child communication to happen, we use something called as an input decorator. And similarly, when you have to have something like a child-to-parent communication, you use something called as a output decorator. Okay. And to use output decorator, you have something called as an event emitter, which is used to like emit an event from your child component, which gets captured by your parent component in order for this to work. Okay. And similarly, for a sibling to sibling communication, we saw that the best way to do it is by using services, which we already saw in the previous week, but still we'll be lightly covering it in this week as well. Okay. So with that being said, we will now like write some code and understand it from the scratch on how to do it. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, we already had this demo app which we created last time, and I think it is now we have written quite a amount of code in that. So what we'll do is, in order to like brush your memory as well, we will create a new project from the scratch. Okay. So what I'll do is, I'll just go to my Visual Studio terminal. How to go to terminal is, either you can go to terminal option over here and click on new terminal, that will open it over here, or you can use your control plus tilde symbol. The tilde symbol is nothing but the symbol which you see just below the escape key. Okay, so using any of that option, you can open this terminal. So the first thing that you have to do is ensure that you navigate to the folder where you want to create your project. Okay, so in my case, I'm just creating it on the desktop. So I'll just clear the console for us, in order for us to like just have a clean console. So if you remember how to create a new project is, I'll just give ng space new. After this, we have to give the project name. So here I will give like I'll just give the name as communication. Okay, so since we are going to predominantly focus on communications, I'll just give it as communication, and maybe I'll just give it as name as communication app. Okay, so I'll just give that. I'll press enter. So now it will ask like do you want to create Angular routing? Give yes. Then it will ask you for the style sheet you want. So by default, prefer SCSS. So we will also cover on what is SCSS and how to write better styling in SCSS in the next week session, when we cover in depth about Angular material and styling. So for now, just go with me and press SCSS. So now if you see that it will be creating a new project and it will be installing all the packages for you. Okay. And once all this is completed, you have to like just go to Visual Studio Code, and here over here you have to give open folder and select the new folder. So for the time being, we'll just wait for now till this is completed, and once the installation of packages are completed, we'll go back to the new folder and create all these things from the scratch. Okay. So now the packages are installed successfully. So the next step is, go to your Visual Studio Code, click on open folder, and over here, if we are currently in the desktop, so just select the new folder, like the new project which you created, and give select folder. So it will ask you like, do you want to save? Just give yes in case you have any unsaved files. And yes, so now we have opened the new folder like whatever we created right now. So now again open terminal. For that, go to terminal, press click on new terminal. And now what we need to do is, so just to ensure that this is working fine, just give ng space serve space -o. So -o will help you to open this project directly in the browser once the compilation is completed in the terminal. Press enter. So now you see that the application started and it is opened up with the default boilerplate code that comes with Angular. Okay. So what we can do is, we can go to SRC, we can go to app, we can go to HTML, and here we can just clear out all this default code that is given. Save it, and just to ensure that we are like showing something on the screen, I'll just type like communication demo. Okay. So if you go back to your application, you'll see that the application is cleared up and we are able to see communication demo. The next step now is, we have to like have a parent child configuration, right, to in order to see the input and output in action. So for that, what we'll do is, we have to create a new component, and we have to put it as a child of this app component. So let's do that. And always, as I said, before you create any new files in Angular, always ensure your CLI is closed. So like your CLI server is killed. So for that, you have to do Control C, and it will kill it. And in case if it asks you, do you want to press yes to continue, just give yes, Y, and it will kill the server for you. Okay. So I'll just clear the console. And how to create a component, we have seen it earlier as well. ng space, either you can type G or generate, anything is fine. Then you have to type the word component or C. That is a shortcut. If you want, you can give C, or you can write the entire word component. That is also fine. After this, you have to give the name of the component which you have to create. So we will just give it the name of this component as child component. So like just for you to understand that this is a child component. So I'll just give the name as child. And what I will do now is, I'll just, or maybe I'll just give it the name of child1, and I'll just press enter. So now it has created the component for me, and it has also updated the app module. So we are good to go. So similarly, what I'll do is I'll just go to child one component. I'll go to the HTML. So I have gone back to the child one component HTML, and over here also I'll just give a kind of a title. So I'll just say child component, and now I have to call this child component in my parent. So what I will do is I'll go to app component.html, and I will just call this app child one and close it. Okay. So I hope you have understood what we are doing. So all we have done is I have my app component HTML, and inside that what I've done is I've just also embedded my app child one as well. So now what happens is this app child one is nothing but a child of my app component HTML because it is sitting inside my app component HTML. Okay. So now we have to start a server. Just clear the terminal. Clearing the terminal is not a mandatory step. We just do it to ensure we have a clean slate. So what to start the server, all you need to do is ng serve -o, and in case you have any previous version running, just close it. So it will open the browser again for you and start the application. Okay. So now you see that this is a parent component and this is a child component. So just to have a more clear understanding that this is parent, I'll just give it the name of parent component, and the child I'll just put it as h2 to show that it is child component. Yeah, so now I think visually also it makes sense that this is a parent and this is a child component. Okay, so let's take a simple scenario. So assume that in my app component.ts file, let's kind of create one variable. Okay, so I'll just give the variable, say the name of name. Okay, and by default I initialize this name to say Angular. Okay, now my requirement is, just understand the requirement. Okay, so my requirement is from my parent component I want this name to be passed to my child component, which is child1.html. Okay, so how can I do that? Okay, so one way is what we saw in the last week is you can use using content projection methods where you have this view child. So what you can do is you can give it a template reference variable name, and using view child you can access this component and give the what you say, you can manipulate the names of that, in case you want to directly change something in your child component. That is one way of doing it. But the other way, or the best way to do it, is what you can do is from your parent component you can pass some input to this child component. Now let's see how we can do that. So to pass an input to the child component, you need to handle in two ways, like in two areas. So one is on the HTML. Here you have to define an attribute for the input name. So say, since I'm going to pass a name, I can also give the same kind of name or a input name variable name to my the child one component. So here I would say maybe my name. So this is just the input variable name which I'm giving to it. And to this I have to now pass a value. So what is the value I need to pass is this name variable. So any value that is added to this name value will get automatically assigned to this my name. So is that, I hope that is clear to you now. And remember that in our previous class we understood that since anything you write inside a double quotes will be interpolated as a string, and this name is not a string, right? It is basically a variable name. So in order to ensure that it takes it as a variable name, what you can do is either you can just enclose it in a square bracket. So that is one way of doing it, or the other way of doing it is you just put it inside a double string. Why it is throwing a red error right now is because we have not defined this mining. So we'll be doing that in a while. Okay. So I hope for now you understood what are the two ways we can give the input. So either you can do in this way, or you can also just wrap it with the square bracket, meaning that is attribute director, and you just pass the name directly. Okay, so we can do it in both the ways. And as I said, you can instantiate multiple, you can call the multiple instances of the same child component in your parent component. Okay, so this is the first step. So second step, what we need to do is go to your child component, and here now you have to define the input name that you have given over there. Okay, so just type input. Okay, So after this, you have to define like, this is basically an decorator. So what you have to do is inside the decorator, you don't need a metadata for input. So all you need to do is just see your app component name and see what is the name you have given. So the same name you have to give it over here. Okay. And after that, you have to give the data type which you are expecting for this. So in our case, it will be a string. So we just give string and that's it. And if you just hover over here, you'll see that it's stating that my name has no initializer and definitely not assigned. So if you see, remember we also saw these kind of errors before. So just to bypass that error, what you do is just give exclamation and save it. So why this happens is, as I said earlier, when you initially load your component, this your child component will not have this DOM loaded, and definitely it won't have this variable coming in. So that is why your TypeScript says that you have defined it of this type string, but initially it won't have any value. So that is just to bypass that, we are giving this exclamation. So it is telling that do not strictly type check this variable for null. Okay. Or the other way of handling it is you can just give an OR operator and define your undefined. Okay. So you can do it in both the ways. So this is this is one step. So this is the one step which you need to do now, where you have to define this at the rate input decorator, give the same name which you pass in the HTML over here, and define the type of it. Okay. Now comes the next part. So what we have done right till now is from our parent, right? That is for our app component.html. We have added this input variable name, like we have defined the input for this child and we are passing it some value from the parent. In the child component, we have defined the input decorator. Now the next step is we have to now bind or manipulate this input whatever we are getting to the child HTML so that we are able to see the change. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just directly kind of bind that variable name over here. Okay. So what happens is if you just come to my HTML, you see that now I'm able to see Angular on both the child because I'm passing Angular from my parent, right? And in case if I change this Angular to say maybe Angular 13, for example, and save it, you see that both my childs are getting now Angular 13, right? So now let's play around a bit with this to see if, does it even also update it in the real time. So what I'll do is I'll go to my I'll just remove one of the chat. So now you understood how we can do the data binding. So I'll just kind of remove this. And what I'll do right now is I'll just kind of create a button. Okay, so what I've done is basically I've just created a button and I've given it a name of pass a new name, and on clicking this button this function will get invoked. So we'll just create that function as well. So I'm just making it up over here. So I'll just whenever new name is clicked, so I'll just give it a name. Say maybe I'll just give it ABC. And also what I'll do is I'll just do a math.random. So just to attach some random decimal points to this name. Okay, so just to let you know, let you see that this works in real time as well. So just to let you know what we have done. So assume that as I said in our previous example where if my block count is updating, I want my child also to get the latest, sorry, if my blog is the blog data are changing, I want my child to know that this is the latest blog information. So similarly, just like that. So from my parent, if I am updating a new data, I should ensure that same data is getting cascaded to my child as well. So let's see if that works or not. So I've come back to my server, to my application. So now we see that the child component, we are getting this Angular 13 and a pass new name. Okay. So what we will do is actually this button should be part of your parent component over here. So visually it makes sense to you. So what we'll do now is we'll click on this pass new name. You'll see that now even in my child I'm getting the new value, and if I click a new one, you'll see that anytime I keep on clicking this button, the data is automatically getting cascaded to the child as well. So how that is happening is that is the beauty of Angular. It uses something called as change detection cycle. So whenever there's a change to the input of this particular child component, it will re-render the component again, basically using all the lifecycle looks we saw, right? It will go from ng on changes, and then it will do ng on it and all that stuff, and it will update the data for you. So that's how the Angular change detection cycle works. So I hope now you're clear on how we are making the parent to child API, the parent to child communication over here. Okay. So this is the demo for that. So now let's try to understand how can we do it the other way around. So say for example, what I mean is, so here what we are currently doing is from the parent we are passing something to the child, right? So what if we want to do it the other way around, wherein if I have some data over here in the child and I want my parent to know that that data is updated, how can I do that? Okay, so for that we have something called as a output decorator. Okay, so let's see how can we configure output decorator now. So for output decorator, right? So all we need to do is we have to just do it in the similar fashion. So just go to your child component. So just the way you declare your input decorator, you just need to declare an output decorator. So just give it a name of output. Then you have to give a name for this output decorator. So you'll give it a name of, say, maybe like update data. Okay, so this name is on you, like whatever based on the operation you are performing, you can give it. And here instead of assigning it some data type, you are going to give it a instantiate it. And what you're going to instantiate it is to a new event emitter type. Okay, so what are we doing over here? Okay, so I think we wrongly imported a different emitter. Give me a minute. I think the VS Code has imported the wrong event emitter. So basically we don't need this one. We just need to import the event emitter from the Angular core. Okay, yeah, so now it is working. So what have we done over here? Just understand. So we have used the output decorator, given it a name, the variable name which we want, and the same name will be going to HTML also. And here we have instantiated a new event emitter. So why a new event emitter? Understand that important. That's very important. So if you come back to our project, like to our application, from the parent, if we want to pass something through the child, we can use the input decorator, right? So what happens is when I click on this button, internally what I'm doing is I'm just changing the value of that particular name over here. So if you come to my app component, you'll see that whenever I click invoke that function, I'm just changing the name and adding some random number, and that is getting passed to my child like this, right? So on a similar line, what if I want to catch something from a child on to my parent, right? So in that case, what we need to do is we have to pass an event from child to the parent, which the parent will catch and then render something. Okay. So that is the reason why you see that, if you take your output emitter, you are instantiating it to a new event emitter. Okay. And not like just giving some string or integer or any data type. Okay. So that is an important concept. For output emitter, you need to instantiate it as a new event emitter. Okay. So this is step number 1. So the step number 2 is, next you have to come back to your parent HTML. Okay. So over here, what we need to do is in the child component, whatever name you gave over here, right, for the output decorator, so which is update data, the same name you have to pass over here. And remember that since it's an event, we have to enclose it with a round bracket. Okay, so anything that is enclosed in the round bracket means it is an event binding. Okay, and over here now we have to define the function which we need to call whenever this event is triggered. Okay, so in our case we'll just first give it a name of catch update, and inside this we have to pass this event what we receive as argument. Okay, so it is throwing the red error here because we have not yet defined it. You just come to your function and define it. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just update, whenever there is a what is it event which we have captured from the child, right? What we will do is we will just just throw an alert in the parent that we received an event, an update from the child. And you see that this argument is now giving a red error because we have not used it anywhere. So just to so in the real life scenario we might use that event to just get some value or something, but for this scenario we'll just just console log it. Okay, and this type should be of event because it's an event. And also one important thing which you have to remember is, here when you in the HTML, when you pass the event, you have to give it as $event. So that is the standard convention we use to denote that it is an event as argument. And inside, when you are writing the function, you should just give it as event or event EVT or whatever you want. So here it doesn't matter what you give. but the type should be event. Okay, and with that being done, so now the next question is like, how do we trigger this output emitter now? So now we have all defined it, like, now we are telling that, this will now, like, kind of like, when you are out, when you have output, we are telling that, on the parent we have to capture, but how to trigger this output right now, correct? So for that, what we will do is same we will do here as well. So what we will do is we'll just define a button. So what you have done is we have just created a button in the child component, and on clicking it we are triggering this event, send event. And what we will do is here in the child component we will just take this send event. Okay, and here we will just now emit the event. Okay, so how to emit the event is just do this dot update data dot emit, and inside the emit whatever data you passed is what the value will be sent to the parent component. Okay, so even in this case I'll do the same thing. So I'll just do like, so I'll just type hello from child, and just to ensure, like, you see that it is working on every click, I will also do a math.random. So what is math.random is it will randomly generate a decimal number for you whenever you, like, click it or trigger it. Okay, so every time you click it, a new number will come which will get added with this child one, and that will be like sent to your parent. Okay, and on the parent what we can do is, so if you go to the update, catch update, right? For now, what we are doing is we are just saying received an update from child, right? So instead of console logging it, that we can also directly show that event over here. Okay. So what that will do is that will just, like, trigger the, like, show that actual value on the this for us. And also we can optionally console log it as well, so that we can see it in console as well. Okay. So now we have done all the wiring. Let's go to the application and understand. So now what we will do is, now remember now that what we are doing is we are trying to pass the data from the child to the parent. Okay, so when I click on this pass event to parent, I will see that, now I get an alert, received an update from child, hello from child, whatever number. And similarly, if I pass second, click it second time, you see this number is changing. I click on third time, this number is changing. So what is happening is, every time I'm, like, triggering an event, my parent is catching it, and in whatever logic I write in my parent to update or show it or do whatever, so based on that, that is happening. And similarly, even here, when I click on my parent, the data through the child is getting automatically updated. So this is the magic of Angular, I said, right, in the initial course. So if you have to make it happen using the conventional JavaScript, you really have to write a ton of code. But here you can just simply pass the data from the parent to the child or from the child to the parent, and behind the scenes the Angular will actually do the heavy work of, like, detecting the changes, updating the components, and doing all that thing. So this is the beauty of, like, using Angular. So I hope you guys now understood what we have done. So we'll quickly revise it, what we have done so far. So we'll first start with input. So what is input is, so if I have a parent component and to my child component I need to pass some value. Okay, so that can be done using input decorators. How to use input decorators is, whenever you are declaring your child component, you have to give it an input name, which is, like, in our case it is my name. You can define whatever custom name you want, and to that you can then bind some variable name from your parent which you need to pass to the child. Okay, and how to, in your child, how to declare an input decorator is, just in your class component, you just, before all this constructor and everything, just define the @input, give the same name which you have given in the HTML, and not equal to, and give it the type. So in our case we have used string. So if you are going to pass it an object or array, or, like, it's a number, depending on whatever data type you have, you can pass the data type. If not, you can also give it null. Any data type is also fine. Okay, but try to avoid any as much as possible, because it's better that you stick to a particular type of data. Okay, and once, then later what you do is, once you have all this wiring done up, then in your parent component you can, like, manipulate the name of the whatever data you want to pass. And whenever, like, you manipulate that name, so in our case what we are doing is, from the parent, like, whenever we click on this pass a new name, to make it simple, I just say pass a new name to child. Whenever I click on this pass a new name to child, so automatically that variable gets updated in my parent and gets passed to the child component, and Angular will update the re-render the child component as well. So similarly, when I do a pass event to parent, so this happens. So, like, this the event from child gets triggered, it goes to the parent, and we, like, get the update over here. So that is the a very simple means of passing data between parent to child. So I hope you are clear with this right now. And with this, we have come to the end of the first session, and we will be continuing this discussion in the next session. Thank you.